Hi everyone, this is Counseling 2250, Corey's Chapter 9, Sexuality. And before we move forward, I just wanted to let you know that this is a sensitive topic for some people, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to listen to this lecture in a professional, adult, college student perspective. Okay. Obviously, I know that some of the stuff that we're going to discuss in this chapter are not necessarily things that you agree with, but it is really helpful for you to become a helping professional with a diverse group of people if you hear or are aware of the different things, whether or not you agree or disagree with the person, right? Okay, let's move forward. So first, what we want you to do is identify the beliefs, attitudes, and values you hold regarding your sexuality and to determine what you want to do in this area of your life. So we are going to ask you to examine your sexuality as well as the people around you because you might not necessarily share the same value system. Sex can be a positive or negative force in your life. It can contribute to your physical and psychological well-being and can make you feel guilty, ashamed, and create anxiety. And of course, another area of this chapter is about HIV/AIDS, which has affected the way we see sexuality. And things have changed, okay? And I'm sure you guys are maybe aware of some of it, but I definitely do want to give you all of the information that you should consider, and then you'll do your own research as you feel free to do so after this lecture. All right, let's talk about learning how to talk openly about sexual issues. It can be difficult to talk about sexuality at any age. The media has helped increase openness to discussing sexuality, but there are pros and cons because the media is probably going to hype up a lot of the more extreme stuff, the more crazy stuff, but not necessarily crazy in a bad way, but just like, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what I'm watching. We can talk about Cardi B and talking about her sexuality, or Beyonce, or Madonna. There are very different generations that approach sexuality in different ways, and some of it is maybe very intimidating, while others are more encouraging, right? All right. Open communication makes enjoying sex with a relationship is important. Yeah, open communication. Mutual empathy is awareness that each partner in a relationship cares for the other and knows that this care is reciprocated. Reciprocated basically means to give back and forth, right? So if I give you something, you give me back something. So it's fair. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to mutual empathy, is that you both are aware of what the other person is thinking and expecting. Some people believe that if they share their needs sexually to their partner, they feel that they are reducing the value of their relationship. Because sexuality is such a taboo subject for some people, or a very uncomfortable subject for some people, they actually don't talk about it. So they'll have a relationship, but they'll never be able to actually open up and talk about this aspect of their lives, which could make them happy, could make them unhappy, could be in the middle. It really does depend on how everyone takes and treats sexuality. Students are open to talking about sexuality, but are still hesitant about talking about their own sexuality. So this is something that I will say I miss about having a live class right now, is the fact that sometimes your classmates are actually willing to openly talk about their sexuality. I remember one of your classmates basically saying that he's in an open relationship, right? So I'm like, oh, do you mind telling us a little bit more about it since you volunteered that info? And he actually started to talk a lot about it. And I think that the other classmates who were very foreign to the idea of open relationships were like, oh, I'm learning something new. And some people giggled, obviously. Some people rolled their eyes. Some people disapprove. And that's totally fine. But what I really appreciate with that classmate of yours was that he was willing to talk about it openly, and he was ready to talk about his own sexuality. And again, like what this comment says is really, really true. People are like, oh yeah, you can do whatever you want. But then when someone asks about their own, they kind of, just uh, uh, basically, don't talk about it. They shut themselves off. All right, respect the boundaries of others. Not everyone believes that sexuality should be discussed freely and that's a cultural value. And I'll give you an example actually. In another class I had, we were talking about gay relationships, and one of the students literally rolled her eyes and then got up and left the class. Part of that is because of her religion. And so, although I respect that, I would hope that in a learning situation that you would still listen, even if it makes you uncomfortable, and then think about it and process it. No one is forcing you to do anything, but we are asking you to consider the fact that your own views about sexuality does not basically cover everyone else's view on sexuality as well. But you are free to get up and leave if you want to, and that just questions whether or not you missed something that you might have learned that might have been interesting for you, or uncomfortable but challenging in a good way. So let's talk about questions. I often wonder what excites my partner and what he or she or they would like, yet I seldom ask. Am I responsible if my partner is dissatisfied? I suppose it's important for me to learn how to initiate by asking, and also how to tell the other person what I enjoy. I think that that's a lot of questions, but really a lot of important questions. And I hope that you get to become more comfortable with your sexuality, whether it is, being celibate or being, non-monogamous. It's really up to you, but to be realizing that there's such a variety of sexualities, and, as long as you're not hurting anyone, right, or doing anything illegal, I think that we should be able to talk about this freely. Other questions is I'm concerned about sexually transmitted diseases, and that's very true. The statistics actually say that millennials and Gen Z have less sex because part of it is they're just not interested in it in one way or another, but part of that is because of sexually transmitted diseases. And I think that's really interesting is, when you hear about a sexually transmitted disease, people do freak out a little bit, right? And it's natural. And we'll talk a little bit about those things at the end of this chapter. Now let's talk a little bit about some statements that I would like you to start to think about. Okay. I would really like to know how other women feel after a sexual experience. And that really does talk about, being alone sometimes. And, think about if you have the first time you had sex, it was probably a little scary, a little weird. And then afterwards, you could have potentially started to think about what just happened, right? And what does this all mean? How do I feel? And to realize that a lot of us don't actually get to have an opportunity to talk and process it with other people because of how taboo or culturally secretive sexuality can be. All right. As a man, I frequently worry about performance expectations, and that gets in the way of my making love. So, women are not the only people, obviously, who have concerns. Men do too, and part of it is the performance part. Some men lose their erection right before sex or during sex, and it's not necessarily a physiological thing. It might be a mental thing, right? And just to let you guys all know, it does happen to many men. So if you're a guy and you're listening to this, uh, uh, don't punish yourself too much. It does actually happen. And then women, don't devalue your men, let's say, if it happens to you. It's not about you. Like, you're still beautiful, you're still gorgeous and sexy. It just does happen sometimes. When I am stressed and tired, I am less interested in sex. There are times when I become involved in sex because I feel lonely. That's really interesting and powerful, right? There are times when I really do not want intercourse, but would still like to be held and touched and caressed. I wish my partner would understand this about me and not take it as a personal rejection. So again, if you had open communication, things like this probably would not happen, right? But again, talking about sexuality, talking about relationships can be very uncomfortable for some couples or some people. How do I use the internet or cyberculture to communicate my sexuality? And that's something that's new in this chapter is the sense of like, we're talking about Instagram, we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about TikTok, where some of us manipulate our photos to look sexier than we probably feel like we really are in real life, right? And so how does that then affect yourself as well? Because let's say that you have a dating app on or dating ad on an app, right? And you had touched yourself up and you look really gorgeous in your pictures, but then you meet people or talk to people and then you actually have to meet up with them. So suddenly you're going to start thinking, do they will they think that I look like my photos? And stuff like that. So that adds another level of stress over sexuality right there because um, some of us maybe had made ourselves feel more sexy because it's a photograph, or we use a filter or something like that, or a lot of filters for some of us. And so how does that then mentally affect us, right? Is this idea of being perfect all the time is just not realistic, right? Now let's talk about developing your sexual values. Your sexual behaviors should match your value system. So here's a question. How do I feel about my decision to be sexual or non-sexual? Are you guys happy with your choice that you made, right? Um, because some of you guys are non-sexual, not because you don't want to, it's just for some reason something is stopping you, right? Or preventing you from having it. So if that is the reason, you know, this is the time to start thinking about what is that roadblock in your life that is preventing you from having sex, if that's what you want, or are you really happy having sex? Maybe you don't want to, but you feel peer pressure, right? So again, it could be various things, but I want you to start thinking and examining your own life about that. Does my choice to be sexually active conflict with my religious beliefs or cultural values? And again, that could definitely affect the previous question, right? Do I feel pressure into having sex? Am I prepared to discuss and effectively use protection against sexually transmitted diseases? And that's a really scary thing as well, is, some of us think that if you ask your partner to put on a condom or use a dental dam or something like that, that you don't trust the other person, right? But it isn't about that. It's about knowing yourself and being comfortable with your own self, okay? Here's how sexually transmitted diseases get transmitted. It's you have sex that's unprotected. And if you don't know this other person, why not protect yourself? I know that some sexually transmitted diseases can be cured through medication of some sort or whatever, but some are not. Okay, so I hope that you value yourself enough to openly talk about those things so that um, it's out in the air and it's not secretive, because when it's secretive, um, there might be a misunderstanding. Again, open communication is such an important thing. Sexual abstinence as an option. Sexual abstinence is refraining from having sex until they enter into a committed long-term monogamous relationship. That's a general definition of sexual abstinence. Every person has a different definition of abstinence. Some say no sexual activity at all, while some will say that masturbation is acceptable. Okay? And then the other word is celibacy. And celibacy is just choosing to not have sex at all. So sexual abstinence is basically you're waiting to find the love of your life, and then you're gonna get married and then have sex and then also have children if you choose to have children, right? Celibacy is when you choose not to have sex at all. Okay, and again, there's varying definitions. This is the one that the book provides. If you talk to people, they might think that those two things are the exact same thing. And to a certain extent, when you look at it, it is very similar, but one is waiting to and one is choosing not to have sex at all. All right, let's formulate your sexual values and ethics. Are the values you receive from your family and culture congruent with your sexual values? And that's a really important question. For some of us, it doesn't, right? I grew up Asian, and we do not talk about sex with our parents at all. Okay. I had to learn the hard way through doing it. And it was very scary. And so, I want you to realize that you are not alone if that's how you felt as well, or if that's how you're feeling now. Again, I'm not saying that everyone should have sex. Only have sex when you are ready and are cool with it. However, I will say, unfortunately, some people were not able to have that choice. And that doesn't devalue you in any way, okay? you are still an important, amazing person. Okay. Um, and I hope that if it wasn't a choice, that um, you are dealing with it and working with it and knowing that your value is amazing. We still love you. Okay. All right. So questions you asked about premarital sex. Okay. Are you allowed to have sex before you get married? For some cultures, no. Some cultures, it's fine. Some cultures, it might be evolving in 2020. When developing your values, one key component is taking responsibility of your choices. And I hope that you do all take responsibility of your choices. Okay. It's difficult to achieve sexual autonomy, which basically means sexual decision making. Think about your previous sexual relationships. Do I feel embarrassed or has my life been enhanced by them? Right? Was sex a good thing for you or was it not? Was it a barrier? Was it a challenge? Was it actually holding you back? Um, think about just sexuality in general. Like, for some people, they are closeted and are ashamed, or, let's say because of the culture that they were raised in or the household that they were raised in. And so, how does that also affect their views on sexuality? Because think about it. If you were not allowed to express your sexuality for generations, or let's say 10 years, 20 years, um, you might act out because your body is like trying to tell you something, but your mental expectations are different. It can also um, do damage or affect the way that you behave. Having boundaries is important to developing your value system. Can you stand by your decisions? Do you respect your partner's boundaries? And I hope you really do. Okay, remember, no means no. Always ask for active consent. Someone can say yes, 5 minutes into foreplay, and then right before sex, they might say no. And I hope that you're able to respect that. Okay, because we're talking about you know, doing something very private and intimate, very close with another person or multiple people, depending who you are, can be very scary. And we might go, you know what, I've changed my mind. And I hope that you're able to be empathetic enough to realize that, and then respect your partner or partners when they say no. Okay, because it can lead to a lot of problems later on in the future for both people or participants. Do not feel like you need to apologize for saying no. Sometimes you're like, what, I'm not feeling it anymore. I'm gonna go, right? And hopefully you're in a safe situation, and that the partner respects you. If you feel pressure to go against your values, let the person you are uncomfortable in a simple, clear, and direct manner. Yeah, just say, you know what, I'm not feeling it right now, or I can't do this right now, right? And hopefully your partner will be able to understand that. Set your boundaries sooner than later. So you want to say, I don't want to go to your apartment instead of trying to fight off the sexual advances that happen inside the apartment. If you don't feel comfortable, don't. Um, I know plenty of my friends will not meet a partner or a person like a blind date of some sort or a dating app date at someone's house the first time because you're like, I don't know who that person is. I don't know what's going to happen. Do they have a dungeon or something in their house? I don't know. So maybe meeting in a public space and really getting to know that person first before you decide to, let's say, go to that person's apartment. Or maybe you're like, you know what? It was really nice meeting you, and let's talk, or, maybe it's not working out, and then that's it. So I hope that you feel um, comfortable enough with yourself to say and do those things, okay? Sometimes we do feel lonely and then we do things, or we're in a mood, or we want to vibe, as you guys are saying now these days. Um, but, if you make those decisions, I hope that you are comfortable with them and are wary and stuff like that. But please protect yourself. You are very important and you're very valued. There are people who do love you. All right. If saying no to sex ruins a relationship, this is a sign of a troubled relationship in the first place. And that's true, right? If they don't value your feelings, and respect the fact that maybe you're not ready yet, you know what? Maybe that's not the right person to be with. All right, let's talk about sex and guilt. Guilt over sexual feelings. Do you guys have that? Do you guys feel that? Here's an example in the book. A man who felt satisfied with his marriage and found his wife exciting. He felt troubled that he also found other women desirable. Even though he doesn't act upon his feelings, he feels extreme guilt. Some of you guys are probably laughing at that. You're like, what? Right? You're allowed to look at other people and say that they're sexy. But for some people, in some cultures, you're not allowed to, and it brings a lot of guilt. Maybe it's a religious person or something like that. To be able to be aware that these are things that people could feel or could be thinking. How do you guys feel about this? It's always a really great conversation to have in class with this specific scenario, I think, because we get to really hear people explain and explore how they feel about this topic. How does your moral guidelines make you feel about the situation? Now let's talk about guilt over sexual experiences. Do you feel guilty about masturbating? Also known as self-stimulation in one way or another, with a toy, with your hand or whatever. Do you feel guilty or upset if your partner masturbates? This is always a fun question to ask in a classroom. I'm so bummed that we're not talking about this because sometimes having a little sense of humor about this topic is good for us, right? It allows us to open up a little bit. People blush, and it's fine, right? It is a personal topic, but again, we are adults and we should be able to talk about all different types of things, especially when it comes to psychology and counseling. How do you feel about having an extramarital affair? Do you feel guilty about it or not? Having multiple partners, feelings for the same sex, wanting or acting upon sexual practices that are seen as taboo. Taboo basically means forbidden or not acceptable in, let's say, public discourse or public talk, right? I just want to let you know that masturbation is very common for most of us. There is a multi-billion-dollar porn industry based on masturbation, right? So I'm not trying to tell you a secret because you definitely already all know that. And of course, obviously not all of us masturbate, and that's totally fine as well. I will say though that masturbation is considered a stress reliever, and I'll tell you a personal story. Kind of. During this whole pandemic, at the beginning, people were riled up. People were going crazy in the sense of the fear, the panic, and all this stuff. And I actually did tell some of my friends and recommended some of my friends. I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's time for you to masturbate because you are going a little too far over the edge, being overwhelmed with what's going on. Maybe masturbation is going to release some of that tension that you have, okay? And obviously, they can do it or they don't want to do it. That's definitely their decision. I am not here to force anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. Besides, maybe think. I love it if you guys think. Now let's talk about learning to enjoy sensuality and sexuality. Sensuality involves all of our senses and can be enjoyed separately from sexual experience. So that means that you can feel sensual without actually having sex. Performance is a major concern for men, which is the reason why we have Viagra and Cialis and other erectile medication. Men tend to be fixated on orgasms. What do you guys think? Is that a true statement? If their partner's orgasm, they feel like they're performing really well. If their partner does not orgasm, they do not see themselves as good lovers and they might end the relationship. They might think that there's something wrong with the other person. Hey, why aren't you enjoying it as much as I'm enjoying it? And, it depends on the other person, right? But for the men, it tends to be that, if I'm not making you feel good, maybe there's something wrong and, we shouldn't be together anymore. As opposed to maybe openly talking about certain things. Again, I'm not male bashing in this slide. I'm just saying that this tends to be what it is, or that's what's reported in statistics and interviews and surveys. All right, erectile dysfunction, also known as ED, consistent inability to achieve and maintain an erection necessary for adequate sexual relations. And that could be due to fatigue or being tired, stress, side effects to medication, believe it or not. This is why sometimes some of your participants or clients don't take medication because the side effects to some drugs is weight gain, depression, erectile dysfunction, amongst many things. And, sex is really important to some of us, right? So then we're not going to take those medications. There could also be psychological factors, and that could be feeling guilt over a situation or something, prolonged depression, hostility or resentment against maybe that person, anxiety, fear of pregnancy, and low self-esteem. So again, do you see how everything is interconnected? Like our brain is connected to our erectile abilities, if you have a penis, and stuff like that. So, it's all a system. And I hope you understand that. Sometimes our bodies are sending us a message about our emotional health or telling us about the relationship. So right there, it tells you, sometimes the sex isn't good because there's something else is wrong, right? So again, another thing that can tell us or signal to us that we need to maybe reevaluate what's going on. It may be bad, but it also could signify major life changes. Maybe it's time to move on. Some women have difficulties experiencing orgasm, again, due to stress, fatigue, guilt, or when the partner climaxes, she may feel a little bit better, but also still feel frustrated and often requires a psychological or physical release. Or sometimes the male partner, let's say, just isn't, pushing the right buttons, so to speak, right? So again, there are many reasons, but the statistics say that women tend to also need to feel psychologically stimulated as well. It's not all physical, which is more often related towards the men because of the sensoriness of it all, is that with women, they might have a mental component that you need to also satisfy as well. Okay. For women only, A Revolutionary Guide to Overcoming Sexual Dysfunction and Reclaiming Your Sex Life is a book that the book recommends by Jennifer Berman and Laura Berman. Now let's talk about asking for what she wants. People often assume their partner knows exactly what they want. Remember, your partners are not mind readers. Okay? Women often complain about men being orgasm oriented. But does she express her needs for foreplay and afterplay? So do you talk about that if you're, let's say, the woman in the relationship? Do you talk about the fact that you like to touch each other, pet each other, kiss, for, a certain amount of time before you guys get into the main act, right? And then maybe afterwards, do you guys want to cuddle? Do you guys want to talk? Do you share those things with your partner? Or do you expect your partner to just know? Because if you are, that is not good communication. Okay? I hope that you are able to verbalize what you want. Can she explain to her partner how it feels to be unsatisfied? Yeah. So, sometimes your partner needs a little direction. Are you willing to tell them? Okay. And then maybe you need to tell them in a nice, polite way, right? A respectful way, so it doesn't ruin the mood. So let's start practicing on how to verbalize those things. Some cultures do not allow women to express their sexual desires at all. And then that could also devalue the female or the woman's role, right? And it should be an equal partnership, I hope. Does touching always have to lead to sex? What do you guys think? Does touching always have to lead to sex? What she is implying is that there is a significant dimension missing for her in the relationship, which is probably the sensuality part. So if guys, if you have a female partner and this is what she says, it could also be a male partner as well. If someone says that to you, you need to start being more romantic. Okay? Trust me, that little effort is going to go a long way for you. You're going to be very happy that you did. Okay, here is a scenario that the book provides. Let's introduce you to Tiffany. This is what she wrote. Anytime I want to be affectionate with Ron, he wants to have sexual intercourse. I really resent Ron's inability to respond to my needs for affection without making a sexual demand. When I sense that Ron wants to be sexual with me, I start a fight to create distance. In turn, he feels rejected, humiliated, and angry. I want to feel close to Ron, both physically and emotionally, but his all or nothing response makes me afraid to be affectionate with him, right? She wants to cuddle, Tiffany wants to cuddle with Ron, but every time, Ron wants to have sex because he maybe have been trained, as a man to say, oh, when a woman does that, that means that she wants to have sex because that's what I need to do, right? And so I would hope that you would not blame Ron for all of it, right? It's more of a societal expectation of men, like, oh, you put your hand on my shoulder. Does that mean you want to have sex with me? Do I need to have sex with you right now? And that's how it's, again, men are also much more touch oriented, physical oriented. So, how would you be able to resolve this with Tiffany? What would you say to Tiffany if you were her counselor? This would be a really great discussion topic in class as well. All right, let's talk about sex and intimacy. Intimacy is close emotional bond characterized by a deep level of caring for another person and is a basic component of all sexual relationships. So it's basically that, that personal connection. Okay. Ranked high is good communication, commitment, and then high quality of emotional and physical intimacy. So those are all the areas that people, when they ask about intimacy, what they thought was really important. And again, good communication is one of the top ones. I would hope that after you get into your bachelor's and then maybe even get your master's, is that you become a really good communicator, right? And then you're able to be that example that you think is good, right? What is the relationship between sex and love? Do you need to have love when you have sex with someone? Do you need to have sex with someone that you love? Your answer will be different than your other classmate. Are you fine without one or the other? Or do you need both? Okay, and we're talking about people who might be asexual, right? Or let's say choosing to be celibate, but doesn't mean that they don't want to be around other people. They might still want that affectionate bond. And that might be you. Are you good with that? Are you comfortable with that? Right? Some of us might actually be asexual in the sense of like not necessarily desiring or thinking that having sex is important, but still need that intimacy. So they might find it with someone and they'll actually have sex with that partner because they know that their partner wants it, right? Or loves sex. So they're going to do it, not necessarily because of themselves that they enjoy it, but they know that if they give their partner happiness and joy this way, that's good. It's a give and take. It's reciprocal. Now let's talk about hookup culture. Hookup culture is defined as relationships that are disconnected from emotional intimacy or commitment, right? Tends to be short-term, non-monogamous, meeting the sexual needs of a person, and also can be known as a one-night stand, okay? Apps on your phones often help people find hookups, right? Tinder, Grindr, I don't know what else. Those are the two most popular ones, and those are the two that are mentioned in the book as well. And there are reasons why people like to hook up now, right? You millennials and you Gen Zers and maybe some Gen Xers. United States trend is that marriage is declining. Okay, so some people define marriage as an old institution. Why do we have to follow old traditions? If we don't want to get married or have children, why do we have to? Another one is some people feel like they need a delay in marriage because let's say they might be more focused on their careers or something. So during that time period, they still need to have some sexual release, right? So then they'll hook up with people. Others are living longer with their parents, and so it's a little bit harder to be intimate with other people. Obviously, there are ways around it. But for some people, they hook up because their families might not necessarily let them date. And of course, economic problems as well, right? In the sense of like, some people don't feel like, they should be in a relationship or long-term relationship because they don't have the money to really be in a relationship, so they hook up instead. Okay. Another term is friends with benefits, or FWB, which is defined as an ongoing casual sex relationship. I'm sure you all know what this all means, right? I don't need to go any further. All right, now let's talk a little bit about HIV/AIDS. Um, AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. Okay, it's the last stage of a disease caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, which is what HIV stands for, which attacks and weakens the body's natural immune system. People who have AIDS are vulnerable to opportunistic illnesses. What that means is that other things happen. You get sick from other things because your immune system is down because of your HIV or AIDS, right? So people will get pneumonia and then die of pneumonia, but that's because the AIDS virus basically is weakening your system. Okay? A weakened body will be vulnerable to other diseases that prey on the body. The length of time is unpredictable. Some people can progress to AIDS in several months, while others have HIV for over 10 years. So again, it is very different for every person. But there's actually been a lot of changes that the book doesn't actually address, but I feel like I need to address with you in the next couple of slides. All right, no known way to destroy the virus at the moment. Okay, so here is the word undetectable. Okay, and undetectable means untransmittable. Okay, early treatment can slow down the progression of AIDS, which is why knowing your status is so important for those who do have, let's say, unprotected sex and it's not monogamous, right? It's someone you don't trust anyways. So here I hyperlinked a YouTube video by the CDC that talks about what it means to be undetectable. What that means is that your viral load is actually so low that they can't actually sense it when they take a test. And that is really good because that means that if you do have sex with another person, it is untransmittable. You can't get it. Okay, but there's also other protections that we're going to talk about as we go along. So if you don't know much about HIV/AIDS, I do suggest that you watch this clip. It's only about 3 minutes long, I think, and it really gives you a bunch of information about what it means to be undetectable. So if you are someone who is thinking about dating someone who has HIV and they say that they are undetectable, you know, your worries should definitely be less, right? Obviously, HIV/AIDS has a huge stigma. A lot of us are really afraid, but it really is something that is no longer considered a death sentence. People live a very long, happy life, healthy life as well, as long as they take care of their bodies and are proactive about it. Okay, many opportunistic illnesses no longer kill people because of medication. HIV is transmitted by unprotected sexual intercourse. That means through the vagina, through your mouth, or what is also known as oral, and of course anal. Okay, you can also get it by sharing needles. Babies can be infected before or during birth or through breast milk. Rare to get it through blood transfusion, and the reason why is because a lot of the blood transfusions now are all tested. Okay, so before they did not test it because they didn't know. Now everything is tested so that it's less likely for you to actually get HIV through a medical blood transfusion. More medical advances such as testing allows for earlier detection. And also, I just want to let you guys all know, if you've never had an HIV test before, they're pretty fast. They're called rapid testing now. And if you are in West Hollywood, I know for a while before the pandemic, there were all these trucks around, which are from nonprofit orgs or actually major orgs that do HIV testing. So they've been trained and they have these things. You go in there, you provide a little bit of information, and then they do the test right then and there. It takes, I would say, the actual test itself takes maybe about 3 minutes. So it's really, really fast. And I know it's really scary. I'm always scared every time I take an HIV test, even when I know that I don't have it, you know, I'm like, what if? What if? And that's really scary. But you know what? It's good to know because what if you do have it and you do want to live a long, happy life? It's to know as soon as possible so that you can get the treatment that you need so that you can live that life that you are expecting to live, right? If you put it off and then you get really, really sick, it's really hard to get better sometimes for some of us. Now let's talk about prevention. There's this thing called pre-exposure prophylaxis, also known as PrEP. And the image here you see on the slide is of Truvada, which is the first one, and then Descovy. So with Truvada, men and women who are born men and women can both take it. Descovy is only for people who are born male. So if you are a trans man, which means that you are born a female, you cannot take Descovy at this moment. It has not been tested and approved for people who are born women. Okay, they both have side effects, but the side effects are considered small compared to the risk of getting, let's say, HIV, right? So I don't even know if you knew that. Did you know that if you take this pill every day and you had sex with someone who is HIV positive, is that I believe it's 92% that you will not contract or acquire HIV. Obviously, you don't just take this PrEP by itself. You should also still wear a condom and stuff like that. You need to talk to your doctor about it. You can't just order this like, at the Target shelf or anything like that. You do need to talk to a doctor because they need to test you. And also, I believe you have to get tested to make sure that you don't have HIV every couple of months before they provide you with the next 3 months worth of medication. Here, I also hyperlinked it to a YouTube video that really explains it. It's only a couple minutes long as well, but I want you to be aware that there are drugs that are helping people not get HIV. You can also not get HIV or AIDS by using the same utensils as another person. I think back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, people were really unsure about what AIDS was, right? So people were avoiding them or refusing to service them and stuff like that. But now that we do know a lot more about it, we can tell you for sure that eating from the same spoon or fork or knife or chopstick or whatever, you are not going to get it, right? Again, just like how COVID is right now, it's like we don't really know what's going on, which is why we were like, dousing ourselves in disinfectant every day. And some of you guys were like wiping down your shoes before you guys went inside the house. It's because we didn't know. But as we study it and get to know it over time, we know exactly how it is transmitted and not transmitted. So in terms of HIV/AIDS, you cannot get it by touching someone who has HIV, through mosquito bites, casual kissing of a person. You cannot get it through swimming pools, and you cannot get it from eating food prepared by someone who has HIV. And if you sit on a toilet seat, you cannot get HIV from that at all. Okay, but you know what is so surprising is that before I told you this, if I asked you guys this in class, some of you guys probably thought, oh yeah, you can get it from this or that, but really you actually can't. And this is why this chapter is so important, is to break down these things and really talk about these taboo topics that some of us are a little too scared to talk about. College students have a high risk because of higher rates of sexual activity, right? The more sex that you have, the more likely or possibility that you might get HIV or a sexually transmitted disease. That makes sense. Epidemic is shifting to women, youth, and minorities. So the WHO, World Health Organization, says that 80% are transmitted through heterosexual intercourse, straight sex. Okay, 10% is transmitted through homosexual or gay intercourse. 5 to 10% is transmitted through injection of drug use. That means sharing needles. And then 3% is transmitted through breast milk and blood transfusion. So it's very low when it comes to that. So did you guys even know that? In 2006, over 1 million people with AIDS existed in America. That was 14 years ago. So I would encourage you all to look at the newest data. This is what the book provided. There's also 525,000 who died since first diagnosis in 1981, and that is up to 2006. So there has been more people who have, but there's also a lot more people who've lived and survived and are living good lives now. 25% are unaware that they have HIV, and this is how it spreads, right? Is because there's no communication, no testing, and part of that is the stigma, like, I don't want to know if I have AIDS or HIV, and that attitude, unfortunately, can be very dangerous on society. So we encourage you all to get tested regularly if you're sexually active, okay? It's okay if you find out that you are HIV positive. There are still people who will love you. I will love you, and I will still respect you immensely. I'm sure your classmates will too, right? It's just another part of life for some people. All right, Africa is the hardest hit. 80% of people with AIDS have died. And part of that is because of resources, and also there's more, not more, but there is sexual violence that does happen in Africa. And unfortunately, some people do have it and then they spread it that way through straight heterosexual sex. People living with HIV constantly fear it, developing into AIDS and dying. And of course, obviously, with modern technologies and medications, if you are actively talking to your medical provider and taking your medications like you are directed to, you don't necessarily have to fear it. But, sometimes people just don't want to take those drugs as well. And then they might escalate into AIDS, and then they might fall for a opportunistic illness and then pass away from that, right? So again, it depends on how in control of your life you are and how aware of all the circumstances that go along with having HIV. Rejected by society in general. I think it's less now, but there are definitely people who don't understand HIV/AIDS who will reject, shun people, will say, don't touch me, don't come near me because I don't want to get it from you. But I think the younger generation, hopefully, I don't know, feel a little bit more accepting of it, and hopefully that's how it's going to be. Rejected by people in their lives. Sometimes family members will reject a person because they say, hey, I have HIV. And that's very, very sad. And I hope that they do find people who love them and respect them and value them. Again, people are afraid of being disowned. Anger is directed to God, like, why me? Why did I get it? At the people who could have given them the disease. So that's blaming a person. Like, why did you not get tested and find out that you were HIV before you had sex with me, unprotected, or something like that, right? You can get angry, and it's a natural response to get angry at someone else. But again, we want to promote that you value your sexuality and yourself, and you should ask. I think you should ask, and I think many people think that you should ask before you have sex. One of my best friends will never have sex with someone without actually going somewhere and actually getting tested together. So that way she knows, and then her partner knows as well, whether or not there's any diseases that she could get. And if she doesn't want to get those diseases, she's going to say, you know what, I don't think this is going to work out. And I'm blown away by that because for me, I use protection, and that's how, I do. And then I also definitely get tested. But I don't actually go with someone and go, hey, let's go to the clinic and let's get tested. Although I do respect her, and I'm actually really jealous that she's that powerful in her respect of herself and her body that she does that. Yeah, and I hope that you are too, or at least give that into consideration. And of course, anger can be directed at themselves as well. And that's just going to lower your immune system even more because of how much guilt or how much anger you have at yourself, right? Instead, we want you to be able to find the proper supports, the proper friends who don't stress you out, and so that you become a happier person and you can move on from this, okay? And then there are other sexually transmitted infections, also known as STIs. Sometimes people say sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, such as herpes, genital warts, chlamydial infections, gonorrhea, and there's also super gonorrhea now, and then syphilis. So these are some of the basic ones. I'm sure you learned about some of this maybe in sex ed when you were younger. Here is a chart, but I do encourage you guys to go online and also read in the book to find out more about them, okay? Some are treatable, but not are all curable, okay? Again, like we talked about before, some of it, like herpes, you will live with pretty much for the rest of your life. Untreated can lead to sterility, which basically means that you can't have babies. Organ damage, and then also life-threatening complications. So when you have those things, you should also go treat it ASAP, okay? Herpes is very common now. I don't know if you know that. So it's something where, you can find a lot of research about it. And it's okay if you have any of these things. I have friends who have had some of these things, if not all of them, and I still love them, but they take care of themselves afterwards. Sometimes, that vibing thing wasn't such a great vibe thing with that person after all, right? And to know that it'll be all okay. Do not be ashamed about your STIs or STDs. You can move forward from there.